Good morning, everyone. This is Julie McDonald with Microcom Technologies, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar with Cambium Networks. Our host today is John Mead, and he is the Vice President of Engineering, and he'll be presenting today. If anyone has any questions, please be sure to submit them in the question box so that John can answer them at the end of today's presentation. John, thank you so much for being with us today. We greatly appreciate your time and are looking forward to what you have to share with us. So please go ahead and take it on over.
Great. Thank you very much, Julie. I appreciate you having me. Hello, everybody. Today, I'm going to talk to you about Cambium Networks Ethernet switching portfolio. And more specifically, I'm going to talk to you about our new series of enterprise edge switches. So let's see if I can advance the slides. There we go. So real quick, I'm going to do a portfolio overview. And then the meat of today's discussion is the new EX3K switches. PBA is a feature that I always highlight. It's a differentiator for us. It's something that our competitors do not have. So I'll spend a quick overview on that. And then I'm going to go over our roadmap, just a quick little sneak peek to what's coming. And then we can jump into Q&A. So here we go. So I am going to talk to you about our switching today. But before I do that, this is probably my favorite slide. It's more than just switching. It's more than just the point product that I'm talking about today. We have a complete, very comprehensive solution. We have the Wi-Fi products for your wireless connectivity. We have the switching products that I'm talking to you about today for our wired connectivity. We have our security and SD-WAN box from a security box point of view. And then we also have our large portfolio of fixed wireless products. Now, all of these products, this complete comprehensive solution can be managed completely with a single pane of glass with our CN Maestro management platform that can run either on-premise or in the cloud. So that this one network, this total solution is really what it's all about. The products work very well together. You get 1 + 1 = 3 instead of 1 + 1 = 2, and being managed with a single management plane. From an Ethernet switching point of view, let me focus on that a little bit. We have two families of switches. We have our enterprise switches, which we refer to as our EX portfolio of switches. And in that EX portfolio of switches, we have a few series of products or switches, which I'm going to talk to you about later, but we have the EX1K, the EX2K, and now the EX3K, which I'm going to focus on today. So a total of 14 models. We have all the typical switches that you would expect: 8-port switches, 24-port switches, 48-port switches. We make these switches with PoE capability, without PoE capability. All of our switches have 10 gig fiber uplinks, except for our 8-port switches that have 1 gig uplinks. We also have a switch in our portfolio that offers multi-gig, 2.5 gigabits of bandwidth per port, as opposed to the typical 1 gigabit. Now that's our first family of switches, these EX switches, and I'm going to focus on those today. But also real quick, we have our TX family of switches. And again, we have the TX2K and the TX1K series for a total of 5 different switches. We have 8-port, 16-port, and 24-port switches, full enterprise grade L2, L3 switching. So very similar to the EX switches. But in addition to that, the TX2K switches come with removable power supplies. The TX 2020 comes with dual removable redundant power supplies. Also very unique in this TX series of switches, we have the GPS sync capability, which the Cambium radios do take advantage of to make much more efficient use of the spectrum and frequency. They know when to receive, when to transmit, based on this synchronization signal that comes from the switch that all the radios are plugged into. Now about PoE, we put a lot of energy and focus on PoE on both our EX and TX switches. Now in the TX family of switches, we support both active PoE as well as passive PoE. In this WISP or tower industry, there are a lot of radios out there that use passive PoE as opposed to the standards-based active PoE. Anyway, we support low voltage passive PoE with 24 volts. We support high power or 4-pair PoE that gives you up to 90 watts per power as well. Now, these two families of switches, we architected these together with a similar design. We also developed them with a single code base. And as we were developing the hardware and the software, we had a lot of things in mind, a lot of things to focus on. The first is from a hardware and a software point of view. We designed in high quality and robustness. So high quality and robustness, very important for us. Number two, these switches, both EX and TX, are enterprise grade L2, L3 switches. They can switch at line rate with no blocking at all. Operational efficiency, that's something that we'll never be finished with. We're working on that with every release, constantly making it easier to use, easier to deploy, easier to manage, easier to configure, easier to troubleshoot. Security is a big item for us, very, very important to everybody. We have a long list of security features. I mentioned already before, CN Maestro is our cloud-based or on-premise based network management system that can manage all your Cambium products with a single pane of glass. And if you consider all the features that I'm mentioning, all the features that I'm going to talk about today, the 5-year warranty that comes with the EX switches, the 3-year warranty that comes with the TX switches, if you consider all these things, the total cost of ownership is very, very competitive. I'd say it's best in class. So this slide is a quick one-pager overview of the entire portfolio, covering both families, the EX and the TX. This slide here is just a list. I know it's an eye chart. I'm not going to go through it here, but it lists our EX1K switches, our EX2K switches, our TX1K, our TX2K switches, and at the bottom here, the new EX3K switches. And this table, you can get this slide deck later, but this table, it's a good reference point with some of the key or more important attributes for these switches. Okay, policy-based automation. So I mentioned this during the agenda. It's a very important feature for us, getting a lot of traction with our customers. Analysts are starting to take note of it. In the switching industry, it's a very mature industry. If you compare the features that we have, the L2 features, the L3 features, if you compare these features to any one of the other vendors out there that provide switches, it's a very similar list. Look at the list of features that Cisco has. Look at the list of features that we have. Very, very similar. It's a mature industry, Ethernet switching. However, PBA is a differentiator for us. PBA is something that the other guys do not have, and I want to give you a quick overview on this. If anyone wants a deep dive, please let me know. We can go for hours on this. I can give demos, but let me give you this quick summary. So what does it do for you? Ultimately, what PBA does is it automates the adds, moves, and changes as you connect network devices into your switch. So as you connect, you name it, anything, printers, access points, video surveillance cameras, anything. When you plug that into the switch, there is configuration required on the switch. Best example is VLANs and other configuration. Well, we can automate that with PBA. Now, by doing this with automation as opposed to manual and time-consuming configuration, it definitely eliminates a lot of the errors that might come with that manual configuration. I know that I fat finger things all the time. This is a very common problem that gets called into the IT team all the time, and this PBA, this automation of configuration, eliminates those errors. Every port is treated equal. So let's say you have a policy that you've developed for video surveillance cameras. You can now plug a video surveillance camera into any port of any one of your switches, PBA will detect that video surveillance camera, will recognize that there's a policy for it, and apply that policy to that device or to that switch, and more specifically to that port. So that switch configuration takes place as well as the port configuration takes place. So this enhances security, right? When you plug a device into your switch, it auto segments that device, putting it on the right subnets, putting it on the right VLANs, so you don't accidentally put it onto a sensitive, high risk VLAN. Overall, PBA reduces the expenses required to deploy and manage your network. Okay, a little bit more detail for you. So policies are created to match types of devices. So you can create a policy for all your video surveillance cameras. You can create a policy for all your access points. You can create a policy for all your whatever, any type of device. It can be a Cambium device or a third-party device. So one policy covers all those devices of that type. Now you can create these policies via any management interface. So enterprise grade switches, fully managed. We support a very comprehensive CLI. We support a very user-friendly web GUI. And then of course we have CN Maestro. Also we have SNMP. So every one of our features is instrumented with an SNMP MIB. So you can use SNMP as well. And with any of those management interfaces I just mentioned, you can configure these policies. However, if you configure the policy with CN Maestro, our system network management, that policy will be created and pushed down to all your switches in your network simultaneously. So you create the policy once, it automatically gets pushed down to all your switches. Now the policies have two components. The first component is, how do you recognize the device type that you're interested in, right? So let's use the example of a video surveillance camera. You can recognize that either based on MAC addresses or based on LLDP information. So MAC addresses, you can enter an exact MAC address. You can enter a file. This is kind of a relatively new feature. You can enter a file name that has a list of up to 200 MAC addresses. You can enter a MAC address range. You can use an OUI. Any way you want to do this. So with MAC addresses, that's technique number one. Technique number two is LLDP, so Link Layer Discovery Protocol. So that's a protocol where a packet is exchanged between the device and the switch, and inside of that packet there are many little snippets of data. You can use any one of those snippets of data to match the device type. So anyway, so the first component of the policy is the rule, or how you identify the device. The second component of the policy are the actions that you want to take. So you can do lots of things. I've given some examples here. You can create VLANs. You can make that port a member of the VLAN, and automatically the uplink port on that switch will also be made a member of that VLAN, so that of course there's a path through the switch for that device. QoS settings, security settings, PoE priority, port labeling. Port labeling is a feature that every switch, every vendor has it. You can type in a description for a port. So you plug in a printer and voila, and you can enter the description for that printer on that port. You know, if you have 1,000 ports in your network, you can't remember where you put the printer. But that's a manual entering, right, for most vendors. And if you remove the printer and plug it into another port, you have to go back in and unconfigure the one port and add it into another port. With PBA, labeling of that port can be automatic. Another thing about PBA is that when you remove the device, all these actions are also removed. So when you remove that device, that port label will be removed. The VLANs that you had created for that device, that port will no longer be a member of those VLANs, and so on. So from a security point of view, cleaning up that configuration when you remove that device is very important, almost more important than the auto configuration in the first place. And then a lot of other actions that you can take as well. Configuration. So what I just mentioned, all this configuration that is automated, we consider that configuration to be dynamic. So when you remove that device from that port, or you power down the switch, or whatever you do, that configuration is cleaned up and removed. Okay, so just a quick little pictorial view of PBA. So if you plug in a Cambium access, a Cambium access point, this is a little bit different than PBA. You don't have to manually create your own policy. We have a proprietary communication between the switch and the access point, and we exchange the necessary information. So the VLANs or the SSIDs that have been configured on that access point will automatically be passed up to the switch, and the switch will automatically create those VLANs and make that port a member of it. Now, if it's not a Cambium access point, or if it's not a Cambium device and you plug in a third party, like a video surveillance camera, this is where you can use PBA, right? So you create a policy which includes a rule, right? So you identify the camera. So based on this rule, you identify, oh, this camera matches the policy. And then after you identify it, you can take the action associated with that policy. So a policy is equal to the rule that identifies the device and plus the actions that you want to take. Now, creating this policy, I'm not going to demonstrate that today, but without me teaching you anything, you could do it yourself in 5 minutes. It's really, really easy. Create the rule, create the policy, you glue them together, and you create the rule, you create the action, then you glue them together and you get a policy. After I show you how to do it, you can do it yourself in 1 to 2 minutes. Creating these policies is very straightforward. So in this example here, we have a policy for the camera, which is equal to the rule that identifies the camera, plus the action that can be a list of many, many actions. I have an example here. You can place that camera on VLAN 100. So with PBA, you've increased the security of your device. You've significantly reduced the human effort. You've significantly reduced the chance of errors in configuration. And overall, you've reduced the cost of operation. Okay, so quick example. And when I'm giving demos, I have like one access point, one video surveillance camera, and then I'll demo creating the policy, and then I'll plug in those devices. And before I plug them in, I'll show you that the configuration is the default configuration. After plugging in a device and PBA takes over, I will then show you the configuration, and you'll see that all of a sudden all the configuration has changed automatically without entering anything. In this example, more of a real world example, it's not one device, right? It's going to be tens and tens of devices, hundreds of devices. So my example here, let's say you have 20 switches. You have 200 video surveillance cameras that you want to deploy and 100 access points that you want to deploy. So what you need is you need to create 2 policies. Very easy, you can do it in 5 minutes. You create one policy for the access points and you create one policy for the cameras. Now, after creating those policies, if you use CN Maestro, those policies will get pushed down to all of your switches and you're finished. You're ready for deployment. You connect in the cameras, you connect in the APs. All you do is physically plug in those devices. No need for any manual configuration at all. And once you connect the devices in, the switch will automatically detect those devices, automatically configure the switch, automatically configure those ports, and whatever is in your actions will take place, creating VLANs, QoS, and security settings, whatever. So very easy, absolutely 100% zero touch. Okay, I'm going to change gears now. I'm going to talk about our new EX3K switches. And before I do that, let me give you another overview of the portfolio. So we are building these switches that are intended to be used in the access layer of your network or the edge of your enterprise network. Now, the addressable market for these edge switches only, I'm not counting core or aggregation switches, I'm not counting data center switches. For these edge switches only, it's about a $10 billion market. And how does Cambium go after that market, or how do our competitors, other vendors go after their market? It's very common. You don't go after that huge market with just one switch. You go after it with a few different options. And at Cambium, what we have is we have the EX1K, the EX2K, both are shipping today. And also shipping today is our EX3K. We've been shipping it for about 2 months now. When you're considering an edge switch from Cambium, you know, how do you know whether to buy the 1K or the 2K or the 3K? So what are the differences? Well, obviously price, right? The 2K is more expensive than the 1K, and the EX3K is more expensive than the 2K. So let me go through this just really quick at a high level. The EX2K is our sweet spot. It has a great comprehensive list of features, and it is very competitively priced. You get everything with the EX2K like you do with the others, Seeing Maestro, the management, so on and so forth. Now, if you are a customer, an end customer that doesn't really care about all the features, all the capabilities, but you still want an enterprise grade switch, you still want a fully managed switch, you still want a robust, high quality switch, but your concern is also price, that's where the EX1K comes in. Features are secondary. The price is what drives that deal. So the EX1K, it's about half the list price of the EX2K. However, let me be clear, the EX1K is an enterprise grade switch. It is not a lower level, lower quality, unmanaged retail switch. Now, the EX3K, that's what I want to talk about. The EX3K is relatively new to us. And what differentiates the 3K from the 2K? Well, a lot. It's pretty easy to talk about. Dual, removable, redundant power supplies. You know, if you look at the enterprise edge market, very conservatively, I would say half of that market, or more than half, will require dual, removable, redundant power supplies. I mean, that's what they want in their network. And these dual redundant power supplies, it's not because one of the power supplies might fail, right? So now you can run this switch with only one power supply, no problem. You get 100% functionality. If you have two in there and one fails, of course, the switch is going to stay up and running, no problem at all. But the reason for two power supplies is not because one of the power supplies might fail. The reason is that you want to plug these two power supplies into two different power sources. So two different circuits in your building, or maybe one can be plugged into a battery backup plan, or so on and so forth. So it's really about the power source that is more likely to fail. So, you know, one of the circuits in your building, you know, blows, the circuit breaker blows for whatever reason. Anyway, number two, PoE per port. 99% of the switches out there today have 30 watts of power available per port. That's standards based. It's 802.3 AF or AT, gives you 30 watts per port. However, as the devices that you use become more and more sophisticated, some of the video surveillance cameras out there, they have pan and zoom. Some of these cameras have built-in coolers and heaters. Well, now you're getting up to where you might need more than 30 watts. Another example is some of the more advanced Wi-Fi access points also need more than 30 watts. So anyway, there's a new standard out, 802.3. It's not so new anymore, but anyway, 802.3 BT. So in these EX3K switches, instead of getting the typical 30 watts per port, we will give you either 60 watts or 90 watts per port. These EX3K switches also use a more advanced version of the switching silicon. All of our switches are based on switching silicon, and that's why we can switch at line rate with no blocking. But anyway, the silicon used on the 3K is even more advanced. It gives us an opportunity to supply more advanced features, and also gives us the ability to scale up the features that we already support. For example, today we support L3, right? Not all edge switches support L3, we do. We support up to 512 routes on our EX2K. On the EX3K, we'll be able to scale that much, much higher. My last point here, and I have it highlighted because not all 3K switches will support this, but some will. We're going to have a higher density of multi-gig ports. So, you know, for example, on our 24-port switch, we'll have one of our 24-port switches, we're going to have 12 ports. On another one, all 24 will be 2.5 capable. And here are the two switches. Now, the EX3K series of switches we're going to be building more and more and more switches, and I'm going to talk to you about that in our sneak peek of the roadmap. But we are currently shipping 2 switches today. Just a month or 2 ago, we started shipping. And what are those 2 switches? Well, 24 port and a 48 port switch, pretty typical. Fiber uplinks, 4 10 gig fiber uplinks, like all of our other switches. Fully managed, same code base, same software. So far, it's kind of very similar to our EX2K. So what's new? Well, for one, the dual removable redundant power supplies. Our EX3K switches will come with dual removable power supplies, as I mentioned before. So now, what power supply are you going to use? Well, we already have on our part list, we have the accessory, these power supply accessories on our part list, because these power supplies are used by our TX switches. We have 6 of them. We have 3 AC power supplies and 3 DC power supplies. The difference is how much power they give you. So from a PoE point of view, what kind of devices are you going to be using, right? How much power are you going to need to use? So we have a 600 watt device, a 900 watt supply, and a 1200 watt supply. Now, if you buy the 600 watt supply and 2 years down the road you get more advanced devices that need more power, it's easy. You just hot swap the power supply. You don't need to buy a new switch. Okay, 802.3 AF/AT/BT. So on these 2 switches, we are going to support up to 60 watts per port. Now on the 24 port model, we're going to support 12 of those 24 ports. We'll be able to support up to 60 watts. On the 48 port model, 24 of the 48 ports will be able to support up to 60 watts. And again, for cameras, for access points, or any other device that needs more than the typical 30 that typical switches give you, these ports will be very useful. Advanced silicon. I mentioned this already. These 3K switches are designed and developed with more advanced silicon, enables more advanced features and scaling up of some of our existing features. Let's see, before I do that, so this picture here, the bottom picture, that shows you the 2 slots for the 2 power supplies. One of the slots, the one on the left, you can see there's a power supply already plugged in. The slot on the right is what it looks like if you don't have a power supply plugged in. We do have these nice little metal covers that will cover that up for you. Now, all 3 of these, all 3 of Cambium's distribution centers have these switches, and they are now shipping. Okay, so I keep talking about the advanced silicon that we're using on these switches. Excuse me, let me get a drink here. Okay, so the advanced silicon I keep talking about. So this slide here, another eye chart. I don't expect you to consume it all, but you can refer to it later. These are examples of things that we can do in the EX3K switches as compared to the EX1K or the EX2K. For example, on the routes, today we support 512 routes, IPv4 routes, the 3rd row down. With the EX3K, we'll be able to enhance that and support anywhere from 1K to 4K routes. We haven't decided how many we're going to support yet. Anyway, there's a long list of capabilities here that we will support. Okay, quick sneak peek on our roadmap. So today, I just talked about these 2 new EX3K switches, and that's what I have listed here, right? There's the 24 port, so the configuration is 24 access ports plus 4 uplink ports, or the 48 plus 4 on the 3052. They both have dual removable redundant power supplies. They both support 60 watts of power on some of the ports, 12 of the 24 on the 3028, and 24 of the 48 on the 3052. They both are using advanced silicon, and both of them do not support the multi-gig or 2.5 gig of increased bandwidth. So we have 2 more EX3K switches coming out. They're going to be coming out mid next year, and very, very similar to the 2 switches that we're shipping now, except they do support multi-gig, right? On the 24 port switch, they will have 24 ports of multi-gig. On the 48 port switch, they will also have 24 ports of multi-gig. This hybrid approach that I've been talking about is very, very useful. It gives you what you need, right? You don't need 2.5 gig on every port. For example, plugging a printer into one of the ports, you don't need 2.5 gig for a printer. Anyway, it's a way to make these switches very cost competitive by having this hybrid type of approach. What else? So also kind of a sneak peek is we are coming out with a fiber aggregation switch or distribution switch. Some people even call it a core switch. All the switches I've talked to you about so far are intended to be deployed at the access layer of your network or the edge of your network. This distribution switch is meant for the distribution layer. So all your edge switches, maybe you have 10 wiring closets in your building. Those 10 wiring closets will feed up into an aggregation or distribution switch. And that's what this is here. This is coming out early next year. This first aggregation switch that we have a few more coming later. But this first one, fairly simple configuration, 24 ports of SFP+. This switch does have dual power supplies. Remember, dual power supplies are important so you can plug them into two different power sources. Now, these dual power supplies on this switch, they're internal. You can't remove them, you can't replace them, but you do get dual power supplies, which accomplishes 90% of the purpose. Now, if one of them fails, the switch will operate 100% on the one remaining power supply. You'll just have to schedule some downtime to swap out the switch in this case. And again, this fiber aggregation switch, it's built with very advanced silicon. Okay, I'm a few minutes over, but that is what I have for today. I encourage you to reach out to Julie or to your Cambium contact if you would like more information, a more detailed walkthrough, or even a live demo. That would be fine. So Julie, I'm going to hand it back over to you for any questions.
Thank you very much, John. Greatly appreciate that wonderful presentation. And it looks like I do have some questions for you. Thank you, audience. Let's get started with the first one. Here we go. First question, John. Let's see here. What is the primary purpose of CN Maestro in managing resilient networks?
So CN Maestro allows you to do several things with your CN Matrix switches or your Cambium switches, but it's not just for the Cambium switches, right? It's for any product developed by Cambium. You can manage your fixed wireless products. You can manage your wired switches. You can manage your wireless Wi-Fi. You can manage your NSC security boxes, all with a single pane of glass with CN Maestro. So CN Maestro allows you to do a few things, right? Lots of things actually, but let me simplify it. It allows you to deploy your switches. It allows you to configure your switches. It allows you to monitor your, okay, I keep saying switches. I meant to say Cambium devices. So you can deploy, configure, monitor, and then troubleshoot problems in your network. You can do all those things with CN Maestro.
Excellent. Thank you so much, John. Next question here for you. What role does automation play in resilient network management with CN Maestro?
So automation. So automation is a big component of ease of use. It's a big component of zero touch. Now, from a resiliency point of view, when you automate things, it removes the chance for error. So let's say I'm configuring my individual switch manually, and I'm configuring it with, I could be using the local COI. A lot of power users like to use the COI. Well, when you're typing in these commands, it's easy to fat finger a device, right? You create a VLAN on port 10 instead of port 11 or whatever. We see these problems all the time. If you automate that configuration, the configuration has to be done. You can't get out of doing the configuration, but if you do it through automation instead of manually, Now you're removing that the manual process that is not only time consuming, but also error prone. So it significantly makes your networks more resilient.
Thank you so much, John. Next question here for you, again about CN Maestro. It says here, how does CN Maestro integrate with other network management solutions or third-party tools?
So CN Maestro has, we support, and this is something we're adding to on a regular basis, but we support a lot of APIs on CN Maestro. So you can use third-party tools that can take advantage of those APIs to do what you need to do.
Thank you so much. Let's see here. Next question. How does CN Maestro adapt to dynamic network conditions for resilience?
Dynamic network conditions. Let's see, I'm trying to think of an example. I'm drawing a blank. Let's see. So let's take the example of switches. So you can organize your switches as one big group of switches if you'd like. And that way, when you configure something, you create VLAN 100, it will get created on every switch that you have. Now, you can also organize your switches into multiple groups instead of having one large group. So let's say one building in your, let's say it's a campus network. You have one building of switches that could be in one group. You have a second building that has slightly different security needs. Let's say that could be in a second group. Let's say on your campus, you also have a cafeteria, and that cafeteria is for public use. And so you have even a different set of configuration, different security settings. So you could have that in a third group. So those multiple groups allows you to, you can still do, when you configure something, you can configure everything in that group simultaneously, but it allows you to break it up into multiple groups to handle that type of environment. I'm not sure if that kind of answers what the intention of the question was, but there you go.
Thank you very much, John. That was great. I appreciate it. Couple more questions here for you. Next one, how does CN Maestro support multi-site network management?
Yeah, good question. And I'm noticing all these questions about CN Maestro. So
Yeah.
let me talk about CN Maestro a little bit. So CN Maestro is an advantage for Cambium networks. You know, I talked about how, and I'll use switching again as an example. I talked about how switching is a mature industry, right? The switches are very, very similar. So if I'm standing in front of a customer and I'm trying to, you know, convince him, hey, buy your solution from Cambium, not from some other vendor, you know, what would I say? Well, I would talk about PBA for sure. I would talk about how we have a complete solution, right? I talked about earlier, we have the switches, we have the access points, we have the NSC security boxes, we have a fixed wireless portfolio, and we have CN Maestro. So we have the complete solution. That's another point. Our solution works well together, right? You get, when you buy these multiple products from Cambium, you get 1 + 1 = 3, right? If you buy a switch and an AP both from Cambium, we have a feature called Auto VLAN, which is really, really cool. That's a 1 + 1 = 3 example. If you buy a switch from Cambium and an AP from another company, you don't get things like that. So that's another advantage that I would mention. And then back to the CN Maestro, that is another advantage I would mention. You know, CN Maestro was designed and architected from the ground up, and it is not an old network management tool that was retrofitted to support the cloud. It was designed from the ground up to work effectively and efficiently in the cloud, and it does a great job as a management platform that can be used to manage all of your Cambium devices. So that last question, Julie, can you repeat that for me?
Of course. How does CN Maestro support multi-site network management?
Yeah, thank you. So anyway, so a lot of the questions are about CN Maestro, and so that's why I talked about that. Now about multi-site, absolutely, we have that built in. So you can manage, let's say you're not the end customer managing your own network. Let's say you're an MSP and you have multiple clients that you're managing, you know, and these networks are all located in different locations, right? Now you can have one customer that has multiple locations. So let's say like Cambium Networks, we have a Chicago office, we have a San Jose office, we have an office in England, we have an office in India, right? So you can have multiple sites from that point of view, or it can be multiple customers that obviously are at different sites. And CN Maestro is designed to handle that. So you have an account with CN Maestro, and inside that account, you can have multiple customers, multiple networks, and it's very easy to navigate. You can drill down as deep as you want on one customer's network or another customer's network.
Excellent. Thank you so much, John. Last question here for you. If an individual wants to consider buying Cambium Network products and they go to your website before buying anything, where is a good place to guide them and show them an overview of what they can buy, what's available, and how they can configure it for their needs, and maybe ultimately talk to someone at Cambium? Can you give us that overview?
Yeah, so on this very last slide that I have here, I'm not sure if it's still showing or not, but I have a phone number that you can reach out to. But we also have our Cambium Networks website. It's a large website, pretty easy to navigate, right? Go to cambiumnetworks.com and you can stay at the high level, read about Cambium, learn about Cambium, or you can drill down on specific product portfolios and you can learn about each one of those portfolios. Or as a customer, you can go to our customer support site, our customer download site. There's documents, there's executable download images. With CN Maestro, I believe you can even open up a guest account and play with the user interface. So yeah, there's a lot you can do and learn from the Cambium Networks website. I would start there for sure. And then as far as talking to someone live, reach out to your local rep and set up meetings. You can reach out to Julie for help, and there's multiple ways to get a hold of specific individuals.
Excellent, John. Thank you so much for answering all of those questions for us today. And thank you for everyone who has attended today as well. And if anyone has any further questions, and of course, like John, you just mentioned, reach out to myself or your sales rep or email us at sales@microcomtech.com. And if you wish to view any of the products mentioned and shown here today, you could go to YouTube and see where we have recorded this webinar and uploaded it to our Microcom YouTube channel so we can view everything again, listen to the answers to the questions here today, and take it from there. John, thank you again. Until next time, appreciate everything that you've shared with us today. Everybody have a fantastic day.
Thank you, Julie. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.